I'd like to welcome Lynne Ryan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it so much. And thank you, everybody, for being here and braving the weather. For those of you online tonight, thank you. I hope you're nice and cozy somewhere and enjoying your favorite beverage. So since we're going to be talking about getting the most out of your time, we're going to get right to it, and we're going to be very efficient with our time today. What I want to do today is I really want you to think about looking at how you manage your time a little bit differently. So we're going to get into some tips and tricks. We're going to talk about some success, but I want you to understand that managing your time, or time management, is really a much more personal way of doing things. So there isn't really one size that fits all. So we're going to get into a little bit more about why you do what you do and why you're maybe accomplishing certain things and not accomplishing others. So let's kind of do a quick look at the agenda. So you can see here, as we've got just a few things on the top, and one of the most important things for us to do is to really start to kind of dig into, why do you do what you do? What are the things that you're successful in managing your time? What are the areas that you're not so successful in? And for business owners, sometimes our day just gets away from us, and we think about, at the end of the day, we're thinking, where did my day go? So we really want to try to put some self-awareness around where your day went and really understand how can you manage that a little bit better. So what I want everybody to do, first of all, is I'm going to ask a few questions for you to really think about what you're doing every day. So first of all, do you really know what you're good at in managing your time? Do you know what areas that you could need a little bit more help in? So I would like each of you to write it down. I want you to write down for yourself, what do you do well? And I want you to think about that. What's one or two things that you think you do well when you're managing or when you're going through your day? And then when you've got a couple of things that you do pretty well, then I want you to think about, what are those things that you don't do well? Because really understanding that first is really critical. All right, so hopefully you've got a couple of things. Now I want to know, do you really know how you spend your day? Question for each of you. If you were to think about that, how do you spend your day? And that means everything, right? So this is one of those points of honesty. I want all of you to be honest. And so what I want you to do now is I want you to really list, so get your list out again. And I want you to write down, if you were to say, what's one average day? Or maybe it's an average week. Oftentimes with business owners, I get the idea of, well, I can't really go by days, but let's look at a week. What are you doing? And I want you to write down everything. So take one typical day or one typical week. And when I say everything, I mean be honest. Do you spend a lot of time on social media? Maybe you take a long lunch, or maybe you spend a lot of time, chit-chatting with employees, which I think there's a part of that that's good, but I want you to be honest. Where do you spend your day? What are all those things? List them out so you can see, list everything, including emails, phone calls, meetings, social media, personal tasks, and I want you to try to be specific. How do you actually spend your day? Because that is super important. Since you're not turning this in, nobody's going to look at it, so be honest. For those of us that like the weather, how much time do you spend on your weather app, seeing what the next few hours, weeks are going to look like? And then maybe that place that you want to go, maybe your Florida vacation, what's the weather like in Florida, and how much time are you spending there? Okay, now that you have your list, now I want you to kind of try to assign a percentage. How much of your time do you spend on email, answering emails? How much of your time do you spend in meetings? Some of you maybe feel like you're meetinged to death, right? Or you go back to back to back to back. Clearly, those of you that are dealing with customers on a daily basis, that's a good thing, right? You want more of your time to be spent with your customers. So what percentage of your time are you spending in each of those tasks? So do you feel like you have a pretty honest list there? I actually had to track my time when I was doing one of my certification programs, and I had to track my time for 2 weeks. So I literally put a notepad next to me, and about 3 times a day I would check in and write all those things down, because I was really serious about finding out what I did. And I actually do this every now and again. Now that I did that exercise several years ago, I try to do it about every 3 months. So if this is something you've done, but it hasn't been recent, I would suggest you do it again. So I want to share with you kind of an oldie but a goodie that I like to use a lot, and it's Stephen Covey's time management matrix. And for all of us, but particularly business people, we really have to kind of understand these 4 quadrants in Stephen Covey's time management matrix. And so what you can see here is that we have this important and urgent, and you can see sometimes people feel like they're always in a crisis, but is it really crisis, right? Emergency meetings, last minute deadlines, unforeseen events, that's kind of that urgent and important piece. Then we move over into kind of the sweet spot in number 2 and look at the different items in there. That's really where we're in an effectiveness mode, and those are the areas that we really want to spend time with. Then we get into this not important but urgent, and notice how the wording around this says needless interruptions, unnecessary reports. How many of you feel like you have too many reports to look at? Irrelevant meetings, others, minor issues, on and on and on. And then we get into this wasted space. We're really talking about our time wasters. This is that trivial work that we might be doing, avoidance activities. That's where I start to get into the weather app or maybe your social media. And notice how it says excessive relaxation, because I think sometimes we try to justify some downtime with, well, I really just need a little downtime, right? Don't we all kind of do that? Yeah, we're going to justify our downtime. So note that it says excessive relaxation. How much time do you spend even after hours binge watching TV? Right? I'll admit it, I'm in there. We can't get that time back, right? So really understanding where we're spending our time, not just in the office, but maybe some of that time after we're done with the office. So as you look at your list, could you kind of identify where you're spending the majority of your time? Are you in quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4? Just kind of give yourself a little minute to look at the list and see where you are. Because for business owners, where we want to spend our time is in quadrant 2. That's the proactive work. That's that planning and prevention. That's really focusing on our goals and really working towards that. And I really encourage that for those that are in a management position as well. But at every level, we should be spending our time here because that's the piece that moves us forward. That's the productive piece. So, show of hands, how many of you feel like you're in quadrant 2 in this room? Yeah, so we didn't get a lot of hands raised here for those of you online, but there's a little bit of work to be done in that area. So I like to have this whole idea of understanding this piece. Now what I would ask you to go to is, again, look at your list. Where are you wasting your time? And be honest. And as I said, I do this occasionally, and I did this recently because I felt like I wasn't effective and as effective as I could be. So what I found is I spend a lot of time on social media. So I use the excuse that says, oh, I need to post a blog. I gotta see how my blog is doing. Oh, I need to make sure that I'm updating this on one of my socials. Well, what ends up happening is that 5-10 minutes that I was gonna check ends up into 30 minutes, and suddenly I've wasted 30 minutes of my time. So I just had to be really honest with myself and start to look at where are the other areas that I'm wasting time. Sometimes it was over lunch. I'd have lunch hour and I would turn on the TV and I would get involved in a show, and then it was too late. So look at your list and kind of identify those areas. Where are you wasting your time? Another one of those areas, especially if you're in an office, sometimes that's chitter chatter, right? You have somebody that either interrupts you, they want to talk about their weekend, and I'm not talking about not having the opportunity to build relationships with your coworkers and colleagues. I'm talking about when does it become excessive and when does it start wasting your time. I once had an employee, I was managing a group of banks in Texas, and so we had a big scope of between trainers and banks that we were managing, and he was one of my top employees, so I want to say that he was one that I really wanted to keep happy. But he was one of those guys that every single time he'd get excited about something, he would run into my office and he'd have to tell me. So you know what that does? I'm thinking, oh, I want to have this good open door policy. I'm available for my employees. They can come talk to me whenever they want. Well, what I found in my time tracking was that Steve, I'll call him Steve, would do that often. And I would waste several hours every week just with those interruptions. Because when you're interrupted, what happens? It doesn't allow you to go right back to what you were doing. You have to kind of figure out, okay, where was I? So it wasn't just the time that Steve came into my office, but it was also all that time that I wasted trying to backtrack. So while that's not on the same level of social media, it was still a time waster for me. So I had to kind of take control of that, and then I started to schedule more periodic times with Steve and said, hey, this really spends a lot of time for both of us where we could be using it better. How about if we schedule some check-ins throughout the day so you can share that information with me? And what I found over time is he stopped needing that so much because he too realized he was more efficient. So find out where you're wasting your time. So as you look at your list, maybe highlight or star a couple of things that you're wasting your time. Next, I want you all to consider, when are you most productive? So just think about that for a minute. Are you a morning person? When are you most productive? Anybody?
Late morning.
Late morning, okay. Anybody else? Is that the only time?
Yes. No. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Most productive, yes. But usually early in the day, I'm trying to still wake up, and
Yep.
late in the day, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody else? Who's a late night person? Right? So you find your late night.
To 3 a.m. is my
Really?
right anything up here.
That's your sweet spot. Okay, good. How about you?
Evening.
Yeah, evening time. So I kind of have several times during the day, right? So I have early morning. I'm an early morning person. Then it's kind of late afternoon, and then I kind of get a second wind after dinner. So right now is a really productive time for me. So when you find those times, why is that important? You want to schedule the things that you have that require all that energy for you. So when I'm most creative or when I need to be really creative, I try to block those time periods off. Now I know for some of us we can't always manage that way, but understanding when I'm most productive helps me plan and prepare for the times that I do. So when at midnight to 3 o'clock, is that when you plan your projects? Or is that when you kind of get into the good stuff?
When I have to write something,
Right.
a grant or a program, it's
Yes.
middle of the night.
Yeah.
I'm most awake.
Yeah, exactly. Or how about scheduling a staff meeting that requires a lot of creativity? Scheduling that at a time when you are really productive can really be helpful. So if you were to understand when you're most productive, know how to use that. How can I take that time and be most effective when I'm productive? Some people would say, oh, you should be in bed at 12 o'clock. But if that's great time for you, go with it. Because time management isn't a one-size-fits-all. It works for you, so take advantage of it. So then how about when you're least productive? When are you least productive?
After I eat.
Yeah, right? Oftentimes people kind of get sluggish after that time period. So when you know that you're least productive at that time, for me, that's not when I'm going to schedule something that I really hate doing, like my taxes. or preparing things for my accountant, or putting together a detailed expense report. For me, now some people I know you're like, that's what I love to do, but that's not an area of strength for me. So I really try to avoid that time period. Sometimes we can't always pick those times, or I won't schedule a meeting when I'm gonna have like right after lunch. Why would I schedule a meeting when I might fall asleep in it? Or what if I'm dozing off? It's not that I'm not interested in the topic, I just know that's not a very productive time for me. So if you think about your list, when would be those times that you would definitely not schedule something on your list? It would be during those times that you're most productive or least productive. So considering when I'm least productive. Now, there are times that we don't have a choice, right? Somebody else schedules a meeting for us, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble. So how can you re-energize yourself to move from least productive to most productive?
Caffeine.
Caffeine works for some, sure. Activity, exercise, get up from your desk, move around, do something that you really enjoy. That was the time when I would go visit with my staff. I'm a people person. I get my energy from people. So for me to make connections with individuals, now I wasn't gonna bother them and be a time waster, but that was for me as a time as a manager for me to be able to really connect and re-energize so that I was going to be ready for that meeting that I had to attend or something that I needed to do that was in a normally non-productive time. Okay, so you're kind of starting to think about some ideas of time wasters, least productive, most productive, because really that's our goal here. The goal is that we really want to try to find where those time wasters are and eliminate as many as we can. And let's be honest about that too, because that's what true management, time management is all about, is making sure that we're very aware of what's happening within ourselves. I think some of us have all tried the planners, they might have looked at an app, and there's a lot of great time management apps. But you have to find the one that works right for you. But first of all, you have to know yourself and where those strengths lie. So get rid of those time wasters where you can. Be disciplined. Turn off the social media and just say, I'm going to use that as a reward for myself, but I'm not going to get stuck in that. So I'm not even going to open it up. Do I really need to look at the weather in Florida when it's 20 below and snowing in Rochester? No. So then the next thing we want to do is really recognize and leverage the times where you are most productive. If that's a productive time for you, take full advantage. Are you doing that now? Or are you spending it in your time waster? So at 12 to 3 in the morning, do you really want to spend your time on social media when you know that you're super productive at that time and you do have other work to do? That's the piece where you have to be real with yourself, you have to be honest, and you have to make sure that you're really recognizing and leveraging those times of productivity. And then lastly, we want to recognize and reduce those times when you are really least productive. Okay? So find out where your time wasters are, where you're most productive, and where you're least productive, and be aware of that. So I'm going to talk a lot about self-awareness today, because again, a lot of time management principles is dependent upon your own style and what works for you. So you have to be aware of those things. So, thinking about that being disciplined, because at the end of the day, I want to ask you a question. Are you managing your day, or is your day managing you? How often do you kind of get through that day, and I said it at the beginning, how often do you get through the day and you say, I don't even know what happened today? You may have had a good plan, right? Like, here's my list of things I'm going to do today, here's my plan, and the end of the day, something happens and you are just completely feeling unproductive. So what happened? Did you manage your day, or did your day manage you? That's something to think about and kind of dig into. What does that actually mean? How many of you do a calendar? where you kind of have a calendar of the things and then you do a to-do list, and that really usually works for you well. What happens when it gets off track? Are you letting your day manage you, or are you managing your day? And so some of those strategies around that is, remember, you have control over most things, right? Thinking about what are the controllables. Again, if you have a customer that comes in, they have a crisis, a problem, what have you, you know you have to handle those things quite well. But when you are allowing that to get away from you, you're taking those phone calls when maybe you don't really need to and you have other priorities. It's understanding where your priorities fall. Does that make sense? Yeah, so think about it. Are you controlling your day, or is your day controlling you? Are you managing your day, or is your day managing you? Okay? All right, so I hear this all the time, but I'm still struggling. You know, I have this great list. I'm really well organized, I'm planned, but I'm still struggling. I still don't get to the things that are on my list. I'm still not getting to them. I'm going to give you an example. How many times do you get done the things that you want to do? The things that you like and that you know you're really good at? And how about during your day, or, you know, and it doesn't have to be within your business working hours, but how about getting to the things that you want to do with friends, family, what have you, but there's that one thing that you don't really want to do? You know, maybe you've got a friend that really requires a lot of time and energy, and so you use the excuse of, I'm sorry I didn't get back with you, I'm just so busy. But yet you had time to do something else that you liked to do. You know, you might see a little video that they did and they posted about something fun that they were doing. You're thinking, oh, so that was the thing that you were too busy doing, right? So I think there's that piece in there of understanding when you're still struggling, look to your strengths. So look at your things on your list again. Consider, are there things on there that you get to without a problem every day? So look at that list and say, hey, yeah, those are the things that I have no problem with. Then look at the items on your list and determine which are the ones do you struggle with. Are the items that you get done the things you like to do, or your strengths? That's why I say look to your strengths. For me, it's always the people ones that are easy. Somebody calls, they want to talk, I have a coaching client that needs some help, immediately go to those things quickly. But it's the ones that are more difficult for me. Oh, I didn't have time to get to that today. Right? Did you really not have time to get to it, or you just didn't want to do it because it's more difficult for you? You know, for some, grant writing might be one that is more challenging, so it takes me longer to get to. Or it might be putting together inventory. That's a really difficult thing because it requires a lot of thought, a lot of quiet time, what have you. But if there's something else that I really enjoy doing, those are usually the things that you click off your list first, right? So I always say to people, if you're still struggling, look to your strengths. And then look at those areas that you don't want to do. And again, it's a be real, right? It would be nice if we could only do the fun things with our job, but that's just not reality. We have to do things that we don't always like to do. So you have to understand, like, why am I not getting to that? Well, I don't like to do it, so I'm not getting to it. The owning up to it is really the first part of managing yourself effectively and taking control. So then we have to look at the value of things. I'm going to back up here. So why do we do it if there's no value? So if there's something, and we'll take taxes for example, because we all have to do taxes. And for business owners, we have to submit our things to our accountant and other areas. So for me, I know I have to do a quarterly report to my accountant, and I have to maintain that monthly, so that I am able to stay on top of things. Well, that's not an area that I really enjoy doing. But what's the value in submitting your expenses and your taxes? You have to, right? So if you don't do it, what happens? So can you find the value in the things that you're doing? So look at something on your list that you really don't like doing. Do you know the value of it? And you might say you do, but I really want you to think about it. Do you really understand the value? For those of you that don't like meetings, meetings is a great place to start. I don't like meetings. I don't like so many meetings. Do you know the value of each meeting? And if the answer is no, do you really have to schedule a meeting? So it's not just about managing your time, but it's also assessing the value of the things that you do. For me, when I do those things that I don't like to do, it means that it frees up time to do the things that I love to do. So take some time and assess the value of each of the items on your list. So as you think about that, look at your list. What are the things that you maybe don't value? Can you eliminate them? Or do you just have to dive in and understand the value of it? So let's think about that for a minute. What's on your list that maybe you could eliminate? Or maybe look at it in a different perspective. Okay, so let's talk about some final strategies to consider and taking control. So first of all, what are some distractions that you currently have and that you face? Give me some examples of distractions that you face.
Phone.
Okay, phone. Okay, what else? Anybody have other distractions?
Junk emails.
Junk emails, yep. Okay, if there's anything in our chat from our online audience, love to hear what your distractions are. Okay.
I have to gossip with my coworker.
Yeah, sure, let's be honest, right? Chit chat. You know, for my daughter, she's really into Kardashians. So, you know, I know for her, she goes off on these Kardashian conversations for a very long time. So how do you eliminate those distractions? It's actually caused, you know, some challenges every now and again. So how do you eliminate some of those distractions? Oftentimes when people are working in an office environment and there's a lot of chitter chatter, that can be very distracting. So recognizing your distractions and find ways to eliminate them. Okay, there's also that piece about advocating for yourself, right? I just need a little bit of time here alone to be able to complete this. And when I'm done, then we can talk about it. It was one of those things that I would do with my staff, and I used my coworker earlier, is that eliminating those distractions was a really important piece, but also being able to let him know that that was something that I needed to do. Some people, now we can put our earbuds in, and I know not at all workplaces that is applicable, but where possible, try to reduce and eliminate as many of the distractions as you possibly can, right? Manage your time frames and expectations. This is probably one of my favorite things when we're talking about time management. And actually, really, it covers so many different areas about managing expectations and time frames. When you have a new assignment, do you get a real clear understanding of what the expectations are of the assignment? And do you know when it's due? And I find that happens a lot where people will take on tasks or they'll take on assignments, or even in some cases I'll volunteer at a chamber meeting or some other type of thing where you really don't have a clear understanding of what that might look like. So how can you be more clear in managing those expectations and timelines? It's really as simple as asking. I'd love to get involved in that committee, but I'd love to know what the expectation was. Okay, so I want to do a quick review. I know we've gone through this really quickly. I know we're kind of shortening our time frame, hoping for some time for you to just think a little bit and reflect a little bit. But think about how you spend your day. Look again over your list. How are you spending your day? Where are those time wasters and the productivity? Can you really assess the value of the things that you're doing? Are there areas within your work that maybe don't hold a lot of value, so you can eliminate them? But the ones that do, figure out how to get them done a little bit more efficiently. And then set yourself up for success by eliminating distractions, by setting good expectations, clear time frames, managing those time frames, and celebrating and advocating for yourself. So do you see other people in your environment, offices, that have like this surefire way to manage their time? See, nobody has it down, right? Like, this is an ongoing challenge. So yes, I encourage you. How many of you are doing a calendar every week? And how does that work for you? So oftentimes I see people that say they get so stuck in their daily time frames that they aren't giving themselves a little bit of grace to look at it for the week. Maybe instead of trying to fill every single hour of the day with something, you think about it as a weekly plan. What do I need to look at for the entire week? What are some of the big accomplishments that I need to do? Fit them into those spaces where you're most productive, and then know that there are things that are going to happen in your day that are going to throw you off. So allow yourself the flexibility to have that happen, so that you know at the end of the day or at the end of the week, these are the key objectives that I wanted to accomplish for the week. So set yourself up for success by understanding where you do best, where you're most productive, least productive, what can you eliminate during the day, and how can you make it work for you. Okay? So I want you to kind of think about, reflect on 3 takeaways, right? So think about what are some 3 of the top things that you think you might have taken away from the last 45 minutes we've been chatting. What's some different ways that you're looking at time management now? So many of you heard oftentimes that if we write things down, we're more likely to achieve them. And there's a recent study that actually says for those people that write their goals down, they're 42% more likely to accomplish their goals by writing them down. So that's why I always enjoy having people really write that down. What are the 3 takeaways that I might have? And then maybe what are some commitments that I might have to change? What is something that I might commit to change? Or do I have some actions to take? I know we did a really quick kind of a whirlwind look at what your day looks like, but have you ever considered tracking your time just for a week and write down everything? You know, you might find some really odd places where you are wasting a lot of time. Again, that's not to say that every moment of our day should be spent in motion, because I think that relaxation is really important as well. But if you are struggling with time management, the best place is to start with you. So really consider what are some things that you might do to get you to a better place. And that would be leading to the next one is, what would I do? What will I do differently? Maybe what's one thing that I'm going to do differently as a result of thinking about how I manage my time a little differently? Maybe what's one thing that you'll do differently?